I think now we're moving to quite a different form of session. So you're going to explore different forms of technology. This is to respond to our international audience. But I'm really thrilled now to introduce a conversation. Actually, unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of me because I was the interviewer. But we'd really, when Louise and I started planning this conference over a year ago, I mean, it would be almost 2 years ago, one of the reasons we thought about to have it at this time of the year was there was a possibility of catching our dear friend and colleague, Professor Christine Chinkin, who would have been out from London. Christine is now Emerita Professor at the London School of Economics, but she was the founding director of a Centre for Women, Peace and Security at the LSE. And Christine has been at the centre of many international moves to create equality. She was actually, as you'll hear, at the Beijing Conference. So what will happen is I had to pre-record this. You'll see we're in Christine's home in Southampton. So you're just going to see this pre-record with her. And unfortunately, because I hope that she's sleeping soundly at the moment, there won't be any Q&A. But people are really welcome to follow up with me and indeed with Christine by email if there are questions that strike you after this. So I'd like now to throw to our wonderful tech people who will magically summon up Christine and me in a conversation that took place just a short time ago. Thank you. Now, Christine, you actually were lucky enough to attend the Beijing Conference. Tell me about it. How did you get there and why did you go?
Hi, Hilary. And it's great to be at least with you virtually. I wish it was in person, as you said. Why did I go? I was asked to be a representative, I think it was at the International Law Association at the time. And how could you resist going? I mean, the idea of going to what was, and I think still is, the greatest gathering of women from all around the world, from so many different perspectives, with such a broad agenda, as was quite clear from the sort of pre-conference document that had come out. Yeah, as I said, how could one possibly not go if there was the opportunity to do so?
And then what do you, it's a long time ago, 25 years ago, obviously, but what are some of your memories of the time? Do you recall any speeches? Do you recall any conversations? What left an impression on you?
The huge gathering of women, as I've already said. I mean, that was just absolutely extraordinary. And I think the other thing to remember as well, of course, is not just 25 years with respect to the issues that were raised at Beijing. China itself has changed so enormously since that time. And so just memories of what China was like, or Beijing was like at that time. Of the conference itself, I think my biggest memory, in fact, was on the plane coming home. I was flying from Beijing through Hong Kong, and then I think actually back to Australia at that point. But anyway, I was seated next to a person I assumed to be an older woman who was from Nepal. And this woman had never left her area before, I think possibly not even her village before. And she was absolutely terrified of being on the plane. She had forced herself because going to Beijing was just so important to her. And she had worked with women who had been trafficked across the Nepalese-Indian border for many, many years. And she had gone to Beijing because she thought that maybe what she was experienced, it was with Nepalese women coming back after having been trafficked and trying essentially to do reintegration, rehabilitation, etc. in Nepal. And she had wondered whether this happened anywhere else in the world and was absolutely, she could barely speak about the impression that the whole thing had made on her. and to realize that so many other women were concerned about issues the same as she was concerned. And I think the conversation I had with her on the plane, coupled with what had so clearly been such a traumatic event for her to get to Beijing, I think lasted with me almost more than anything else actually in Beijing itself.
Oh, so, well, that leads on then to another question that I've had, is that, of course, there were the two conferences at Beijing. There was the official one, there was the civil society one. They were held in different places, I understand. So I'm just wondering how, from your memory of it, how did the civil society gathering operate vis-a-vis the official conference? Was there much traffic between them, or?
I really don't know the answer to that. As you say, I mean, it was a big issue before the conference started, because at the time when Beijing, I'm not sure what the bidding process is, but at the time when the conference was decided to be in Beijing, I suppose it was said that the civil society part of the conference would be either adjacent to or very close to the main conference site in Beijing. And then very shortly before the conference, it was announced that this was apparently unsafe, and therefore, the civil society conference was going to have to be moved. I can't remember the exact distance, but it was quite a considerable bus journey. And they had this fleet of buses. I do remember being on one bus when all the windows blew out. They were pretty rickety buses. And so everyone had to make a decision really each day. Were they going to stay in Beijing with no access to the main conference, or go out to Huairou, where the NGO conference was being held? And certainly from my perspective, I mean, I presume there were many women who did have far more contact with the main conference. I really didn't. And I think that I'd been at Vienna earlier, 1993 was the World Conference on Human Rights. And at that, the NGO conference was downstairs, the major conference was upstairs, and delegates mixed, and there was a real feeling of being part of a common enterprise. From my own perspective, and I suspect other members of civil society who were far more connected either with government delegates or had other ways of participating in the main conference, didn't feel like this, but I just felt there were two very separate events.
And so were you aware at all of some of the controversies around the drafting of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, or was that, when you got hold of the document in the end, was that a surprise to you?
People were talking, and when we got back to the hotel at night, there would be some people who had been involved, in what the controversies were, and I'm trying to remember whether I actually even met some of the people who were more closely associated with the delegates. So yeah, in very general terms, aware of some of the issues, but not the nitty-gritty of precise wording and which provisions were still in square brackets and how those were going to be resolved, or any of those aspects.
So it's interesting what you say, because in a way, a lot of what this conference we're holding will consider is, when people think of Beijing, they think of the documents, the Declaration, the Platform for Action. And I suppose what, in a sense for you, there were quite other memories. Those are the official memory, if you like, of the conference. And then there are all these other ones that you're pointing to. But I'm wondering, when you then read the Beijing Platform for Action, or even when you've read it since then, what would you say are the major achievements of those official memories, if I can call them that, of Beijing?
Can I just go back just to the unofficial memories first? I think what is so difficult to recapture, and sort of having this conversation is making me do so, was the absolute vibrancy of the NGO conference. The many panels, discussions, dance events, song, just the pure energy that was there. And so many people from so many different walks of life, experience and so on. I mean, it really was an absolutely amazing experience. It's hard. I mean, Beijing, the document, has now been part of our lives now, as you say, for 25 years. It's been a teaching tool. It's been a reference point. So I think that whenever thinking about how particular areas of women's human rights, for example, has evolved, Beijing still tends to be the starting point. Go back what was in the Beijing document. I think that many, I don't know whether you share the same view, it was very much the high point. This was the blueprint. Yeah, this was the document that really so many aspects really were articulated and agreed at that point. And if we take Beijing along with Cairo 1994, Vienna 1993, that package, I think, was the high point for women's human rights. The inclusion of poverty and the importance of both the feminization of poverty and the importance of seeking ways of addressing women's poverty, clearly violence against women. And when one looks back at the provisions relating to violence and armed conflict, the inclusion of military expenditure, of weapons, the importance of universal general disarmament, the inclusion of women's rights as human rights, although that, of course, was one of the areas of controversy. Many women's groups wanted human rights to be throughout the document, not just at one of the 12 critical areas of concern. The challenges, and I think this is something, of course, that's emerged far more strongly in recent years, of recognizing diversity among women, particularly around sexuality, gender identity. And that is an area where Beijing is not, I think, as advanced as looking back would have been hoped for now. It was an area where there were compromises. I think the holistic nature of the document and 12 critical areas of concern is still an extraordinary achievement.
What did you, when you left Beijing, I mean, what did you imagine might happen? Did you see that as sort of breaching a great wall, and progress would follow, or what was your thoughts? Looking back, it certainly seems a great highlight, and progress has been somewhat ambivalent since then. But I was just wondering if you could recapture what you imagine might happen.
After 25 years.
You've got a good memory, I know that.
I think there'd already been perhaps a warning, if you like, in that the UK government had held, I can't remember if it was some sort of an event for British nationals who were there at Beijing, some NGOs as well. And I can remember very clearly whoever was the head of the UK delegation saying, right, we have now got this document. It's up to you in civil society to implement it. And I can't remember if those were her exact words, but along that sort of message generally. And thinking, no, it's not up to civil society to implement it. It's up to governments. These are government commitments. And I think that was already perhaps a bit of a warning sign that governments were not necessarily going to be wholehearted in giving effect to the commitments that have been made in the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action. Again, it's hard, I think, to think about what anticipated from Beijing itself. without, I mean, it had been this steady progression from 93, 94, 95. And yes, it did feel like progress. And it did feel like women's human rights, issues about violence against women, issues around women's economic, social rights were clearly on the international agenda. And couple this as well with the, at that point, 95, it looked like an international criminal court was going to come into existence, which of course it did 3 years later. And the issues around recognizing under international criminal law, crimes of sexual, gender-based violence as crimes against humanity, war crimes, etc. There was this whole excitement around all of this coming together at that point. And yes, I do think that there was at least an anticipation that that progress would continue and that words might be translated into action across all of these various fields. Just coming to where my most recent work has been, I think already by 2000 we get Resolution 1325, the starting of the Women, Peace and Security agenda within the Security Council, which in many ways I think was an ambition to translate or to bring some of the principles from Beijing, particularly those relating to women in armed conflict, into the power structures of the Security Council, and seeing that as a way of implementation. But even then, Beijing had been weakened down. So there is nothing in 1325 about arms control, for example, or about addressing the militarization that had been perceived at Beijing. And then, of course, we get 9/11 the following year. And again, looking back, that's on 20 years, beginning to see, I think, the erosion of that assumption of progress, and then beginning to realize that what we need to do is fight to keep what we have in Beijing.
Well, I completely agree. I wonder then, from where we are today, if you had to, and I know it's a difficult thing to answer briefly, but how would you, if you had to tell a story about the last 25 years in terms of progress for women's human rights, how would you describe it? Is it a case of just downhill from Beijing, or is it more complicated than that?
It's far more complicated, isn't it? I mean, quite clearly there have been gains, and from many women, real gains on the ground, but also, of course, for many women, losses on the ground or never achieving in the first. So, I mean, we're talking about such both multiple different contexts around the world and so many different strands of political, economic, social development. And what I think we can say is perhaps two things. One, the realization that, or the greater realization and the need to take into account in formulating law and policy of the great diversity of women. If we go back sort of pre-Beijing to the CEDAW Convention, where I think there was still an assumption of women, Beijing begins to see that in a more complex and more recognizing the multiplicity of situations and identities of women. I think that has developed since then. And as I say, the importance of taking that into account in any policy or social development, lawmaking. So that on the one hand, I can't remember what I was going to say as the second one. No, sorry, gone.
Well, more generally then, I wanted to ask you to, I guess, to make your point slightly more abstractly, in the sense that, reflecting on the past 25 years, what lessons about feminist-inspired change might you draw from them? There's a sense, I guess, among a lot of people who look at the international scene that we're currently in a state of crisis with respect to women's rights, with a lot of authoritarian or populist governments clawing back on women's rights. But is that too negative a take? How does change actually occur? It's not linear from what you've said, but how might you think about feminist change?
I've been doing quite a lot of work recently, going back way before Beijing, back to the turn of the 20th century, and the origins of women's international organizations, such as the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And when one looks back at what they were saying in 1915, 1919, there's a wonderful manifesto that they produced in 1924. What we see over and over again are very much the same concerns as we still have today. And I think what that really highlights is that we just have to keep on. Resistance, organization, networking. Clearly there are both new avenues through social media, the internet today, that were unheard of even at the time of Beijing. But equally, of course, those also create further obstacles and further hurdles and further setbacks. So I think adaptation, flexibility, and just resistance, just having to keep on, seize when there are windows of opportunity, try to take them. I mean, Beijing was a huge window of opportunity, and it was taken by women's or NGOs at that point, and achievements were made. I think we just have to keep on, trying to do that. I've got no great I wish I had no great answer.
Well, I think, though, that's quite a profound answer, in a sense, in that there is no secret key. It's remaining true to the commitment and to finding the spaces where it's possible to draw it. The final question I want to ask you is perhaps just to get you, one of the things you've done much more recently than Beijing is to be involved in the drafting of the Istanbul Convention, this very important treaty of the Council of Europe dealing with violence against women. I just wondered, so you've been involved in this quite concrete exercise of putting together this landmark treaty. How useful would you reflect on how is the treaty drafting exercise in promoting women's rights?
Do you mean the treaty drafting, or do you mean achieving a treaty?
Well, yes.
Yeah, no, achieving a concrete treaty. Yeah.
Achieving a treaty.
I think it is important, and I think it has been important for women in Europe, in that it gives a very concrete set of government obligations that women can then hold their governments to, assuming, of course, that the government has become a party to the treaty. And I am coming from a country where there has still been a very constant assertion that, yes, they are going to do so, but failure to actually take that step. But as with any form of law passing, getting the law is only the first step. And what is then necessary is the allocation of resources, the assumption of responsibility on the part of the government, the measures to make sure that women within the country are aware of the treaty and its potential use, everything that goes with making a law effective on the ground. as well as just the sort of written words of it. So yes, I do think it is still an important step, but it's not the final step.
Well, look, that's a great point perhaps to finish our recording. But Christine, we're really sorry that you won't be joining us in Sydney and Melbourne. So the conference is being held somewhere in the ether.
In between
we're
Sydney
really
and
sorry
Melbourne.
that you're not here, but I know that you are an inspiration, you and your work are an inspiration for a lot of people who'll be watching this. So thank you very much for giving us your time. I'll pause.
Thank you, Hilary.